The mandate hovered above the chamber like a sentence already carved into stone, and every council delegate pretended humanity was too obsolete to notice the blade. They spoke in layered harmonics, voices overlapping in smug agreement, as if the verdict were a mere administrative correction rather than the breaking of a civilization. 11 dreadnoughts drifted into position outside the council spire, forming a perfect ceremonial firing wall, 11 engines humming with cold finality, 11 shadows stretching across the viewport like a eulogy for a species they considered primitive. The archivist of Ordos ran a taloned finger across a projection and let the word relics hang in the air with deliberate contempt. To them, humans were a statistical afterthought, a noisy anomaly that refused to collapse into predicted compliance. They recited centuries of grievances as though reading an old myth, Terrans advancing too quickly, refusing to adopt council doctrine, insisting on independent navigation lanes. Petty trespasses, inflated until they justified a surrender mandate. The hall resonated with the kind of confidence only large committees and larger fleets could sustain. The Zari Prime leaned forward, frills trembling with amusement, and asked who would explain the surrender terms to a species still processing in linear cognition. Laughter rippled through the tiers, calibrated, polite, cruel. The humans, they insisted, would accept the mandate once confronted with numerical inevitability. They would see the 11 dreadnoughts and understand their place. They always believed humans would fold when faced with size, with ceremony, with the weight of authoritarian tradition. Outside the viewport, the dreadnought array shifted by 0.7 degrees, an alignment the council believed symbolic. Precision mattered to them. The humans, they claimed, would not recognize the significance of an 11-ship firing arc refined over 4 centuries. They believed humanity could not decipher the message. They were wrong. One delegate asked whether Terrans would resist. The chamber replied in unanimous dismissal. Humans lacked the fleet mass. Humans lacked the political alliances. Humans lacked the technological discipline. Every charge echoed through the hall like a pre-scripted chorus. A smaller voice suggested caution, noting the humans' unusual silence in the weeks leading to the summit. The notion was waved away. Silence, they claimed, was fear. Silence was surrender in progress. They misread everything. A courier drone arrived with the final legal packet, the mandate of total subordination, binding upon signature. The council prepared their ceremonial phrasing, long, ornate, heavy with condescension. They wanted the humans to hear every syllable of their perceived superiority. They rehearsed the mockery before the humans even entered. One line stood out, rehearsed 3 times. Humanity shall cede sovereignty for its own stabilization. A stinger slid across the room like a blade. They thought this was mercy. Through the viewport, the 11 dreadnoughts intensified their formation glow, projecting dominance in brute geometric clarity. Any remaining hesitation dissolved under the sight of that united wall. The council believed their display was unassailable. They never considered that the humans might simply smile at it. When the doors opened and the Terran delegation stepped in, calm, silent, unreadable, the chamber felt a subtle shift it could not name. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't fear. It was readiness. And the council, for all its projections and all its certainty, did not recognize the moment the balance began to turn. The Terran envoys entered with the quiet precision of a species that no longer needed to explain itself. No guards, no banners, no visible weapons. Just 4 representatives moving as one, their steps measured, their expressions calm as deep water. The council expected hesitation, bargaining, or at least a flash of fear. Instead, the humans stopped exactly at the center of the chamber, hands folded behind their backs,
as if they had rehearsed the geometry of stillness. The presiding delegate asked if humanity understood the mandate of surrender. The Terran lead, Envoy Saren Ward, offered a single nod, acknowledging comprehension, not agreement. The council misread the distinction instantly, leaning forward with the hunger of predators expecting a bowed neck. Ward's voice held no tremor when he answered. Earth declines. 2 words released like controlled breath. No rhetoric, no anger, no defiance. Just a simple fact delivered with the weight of inevitability. The council chamber blinked in stunned silence, then erupted in overlapping disbelief. They called the humans reckless, irrational, dangerously uninformed. They insisted the Terrans had not seen the dreadnought wall, though it loomed behind the envoys like a judgment. Ward did not turn to look at it once. One delegate demanded clarification. Another demanded submission. A third suggested immediate detention. The humans didn't react. Their stillness became an accusation the council couldn't name. Calmness in the face of overwhelming force felt like violation, an unexpected fracture in the script. Ward lifted a small hollow emitter and placed it on the floor. A soft pulse radiated outward, silent, invisible beyond a faint ripple of blue. Several delegates instinctively recoiled as if expecting a weapon. Instead, a single line of data scrolled across the central display. 67 assets activated. The council froze. In high anchor orbit, 67 Terran response ships, previously dismissed as civilian pattern escorts, lit their drives in synchronized ignition. No broadcast, no threats, no formations angled toward the council fleet. Merely activation, readiness. A pressure shift in the room came from minds recalculating risk. One delegate sputtered that such movement violates treaty protocol. Ward replied evenly, "We have violated nothing. You ordered us to surrender. We refused. Nothing else has changed." A clean stinger cut through the chamber. We do not escalate. We prepare. The dreadnought commanders outside ran silent diagnostics, noticing the Terran ships had positioned themselves at precise 0.8-degree offsets, angles that suggested counter-volley geometry. The humans weren't threatening, they were anticipating. Anticipation to the council was more disturbing than aggression. Another delegate demanded the purpose of the activation. Ward answered with the same calm cadence. Readiness is not aggression. Your mandate assumed our compliance. Our silence allowed you to believe it. The chamber's temperature felt colder, not because of fear, because of miscalculation. A single Zari asked if the humans intended conflict. For the first time, Ward offered a faint shift of expression, something between patience and disappointment. Earth intends to survive. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The 67 signatures in orbit said everything the envoys would not. As the council descended into frantic side chatter, Ward glanced once toward the viewport, not at the dreadnoughts, but at the distance beyond them, as though measuring what came next. The refusal was complete, and the readiness, finally visible, spoke louder than any threat could. The first shot came not as a declaration, but as an instinctive flinch from a power unaccustomed to being denied. A council captain, rattled by the Terran refusal and the activation of those 60 silent ships, authorized a warning volley. Every species in the chamber watched the dreadnought wall brighten, 11 colossal hulls channeling energy along polished conduits meant to intimidate entire star nations. The volley launched in a single unified surge, a burn so bright it washed color from the spire's interior. Delegates leaned in, expecting human panic or transmission outages. They wanted the blast to end the negotiation, to force the Terrans back into the posture the Council had. But the humans did not move. Outside, the Terran grid unfolded like a patient machine. No shimmer, no exposed plating, just faint interlocking patterns, geometry rather than spectacle. The volley struck with the force of a collapsing star fragment, and the grid swallowed it.
92.3% absorption. The number appeared in real-time telemetry, flashing across Council consoles. It didn't fall, it didn't spike, it simply stabilized, as if the system had been built for this exact type of fire. A stinger hit the chamber like a pulse of cold air. Energy resolved, no breach. The remaining 7.7% dispersed across the grid in harmless ribbons that faded into the dark. No flare, no debris, no damage. The glow died before it reached human hulls. The counselors stared, struggling to reconcile their 4-century-old model of Terran capability with the quiet perfection of the grid's response. One asked if this was an illusion. Another accused the humans of deploying forbidden technology. A third whispered the most unsettling possibility: preparation. On the Council flagship, dreadnought captains ran the numbers 3 times. 92.3% absorption matched nothing in known doctrine. Their own shields would have buckled at sustained hits. Terran systems, once mocked as kinetic fossils, were now countering modern energy fire with mathematical elegance. Ward, standing in the same posture as before, finally spoke. "You chose to fire upon us. We chose not to respond." Not a taunt, a fact, delivered with surgical neutrality. The Council chamber tried to regain control. Orders flew to realign the dreadnoughts, to widen the arc, to concentrate power. 11 ships shifted by 0.9 degrees, forming a dense firing lattice. A second volley surged, stronger, sharper, designed to overwhelm through sheer amplitude. The grid flexed again. Absorption, 92.3%. Diffusion, complete. Collateral, 0. The sameness of the number was the real shock. Stability implied mastery, not luck. The humans had calibrated their system to the Council's weapons years before the meeting. "What are they?" someone whispered. Ward did not answer. Dreadnought commanders hesitated. Firepower meant nothing if the receiving end treated it as a predictable equation. Their calculation had always been simple. Force produces compliance. Now the answer had inverted. One Council envoy tried to salvage control. "Terrans, you must." Ward's gaze silenced him. "We will not escalate, we will not fire, but we will not yield." The chamber felt suddenly smaller, as if the grid outside were pressing inward with its quiet certainty. For the first time, the Council realized the reversal had already begun. The silence after the failed volleys felt heavier than the blasts themselves. Council ships hesitated, unsure whether to fire again or retreat from the unknown geometry of the Terran grid. For a brief moment, the void held its breath, until the humans moved. Not the grid, not the envoy, something behind it. A faint ripple appeared along the shadowed curvature of the Terran defensive web. No energy swell, no engine flare, just motion. Clean, minimal, inevitable. Then the interceptors slipped free. Small compared to dreadnoughts, but built with the sharp purpose of weapons that had outgrown intimidation. They emerged in staggered pairs, hull signatures muted, flight paths mathematically pure. Council sensors scrambled to classify them. The systems reported low-mass craft, then unknown, then simply unresolvable. The Council chair demanded a reading. The answer arrived too quickly and too late. Acceleration, 21.4 G. The number froze the chamber. Their own fighters barely maintained 9 G in combat arcs. Anything past 14 G tore predictive algorithms apart. But these interceptors weren't struggling. They were dancing through the void with effortless precision, as if 21.4 G was simply the speed humanity used when it needed to be somewhere immediately. A lone stinger cut through the murmurs. Trajectory collapse detected. The Council's predictive models, refined across 6 species, convulsed under the strain. Every time the system plotted an intercept point, the Terran craft broke the line, shifting by microvectors too subtle to counter and too fast to follow. 11 dreadnoughts recalculated firing solutions. 11 firing solutions failed before completion. Ward didn't look at the display. The Terrans seemed to know the outcome before the Council did. The interceptors fanned outward, forming a layered crescent between the dreadnoughts and the grid. Not threatening, not locking targets, simply positioning, angles that radiated a quiet message.
Escalation would be mutual, not one-sided. One dreadnought captain panicked and triggered a partial sweep, a broad cone of charged particles meant to flush smaller craft from hiding. The sweep bloomed like a false sunrise across the battlefield. The Terran interceptors slipped through it without resistance. No shielding surge, no evasive burn. They bent their trajectories by less than 0.02 degrees and remained untouched. Council analysts scrambled. The sweep had been calibrated for mass and signature. The Terran craft refused both inputs. The captain tried a second sweep. Failure rate 100%. The council chamber erupted in layered panic. Accusations, denials, fragmented explanations. Someone demanded to know whether the Terrans had built new hull materials. Another whispered that humans had abandoned biological limits entirely. Ward watched them unravel, then spoke with the same calm cadence as before. Our craft respond to intent, not intimidation. No boasting, just clarity. As the interceptors completed their final arc, they settled at precise offsets, 67 ships reinforced by dozens of smaller craft. The formation resembled a shield rather than an attack line. The Council realized, with slow horror, that humanity had the capability for annihilation but had chosen defense instead. And nothing undermined their certainty more than restraint. The dreadnought captains finally broke. The interceptors' impossible arcs, the grid's unyielding absorption, the human silence, something snapped beneath the weight of their own fear. Without waiting for Council approval, the Vanguard line advanced, 11 cruisers and 34 escorts pushing forward in a staggered wedge meant to overwhelm by mass alone. They never reached optimal range. The Terran grid pulsed once, faint, almost gentle, and the interceptors peeled aside, opening a narrow corridor that pointed directly toward the human ships behind the web. Council sensors locked onto movement, but what emerged was not a fighter, nor a missile, nor anything the chamber recognized. It was a kinetic lance. A long, dark cylinder accelerated from the Terran formation with no visible ignition. No thrusters, just raw velocity born from something deeper than Council science understood. The first lance crossed 9,000 kilometers in a flicker. Before the chamber could react, the second launched. Cycle rate 0.42 seconds. The number flashed across every console like a verdict. A stinger followed, sharp as static. Impact window confirmed. The first lance struck the lead cruiser. There was no explosion, just a silent deformation, metal folding inward as though punched by an invisible fist. A second lance hit 0.42 seconds later, slicing the wounded vessel into two drifting halves. Council delegates recoiled as if they themselves had been split. A third lance fired. A fourth. A fifth. Each one released at the exact interval, 0.42 seconds, unwavering, metronic, terrifying. The Vanguard wedge tried to scatter, but by the time their thrusters flared, the lances were already threading between them with surgical cruelty. Human targeting did not chase movement, it predicted it with unnerving certainty. Even micro-evasive burns failed, models collapsed, confidence shattered. Impact number 7 bisected an escort at its spine. Impact number 10 gutted a cruiser from bow to engine.
Rings. Impact 14 removed a command node so cleanly the hull didn't realize it had died until it drifted. The chamber erupted in layered panic. One delegate demanded a ceasefire order. Another screamed that their ships had no counter-solution. A third simply stared at the screen, whispering that the lances should not exist. Ward remained still, his expression unchanged, calm in chaos, precision mirrored in flesh. The Council finally issued an order: retreat the Vanguard. But retreating required distance, and distance required time. The lances denied both. Every 0.42 seconds, a new vector formed. Every 0.42 seconds, another ship died. The dreadnoughts tried one last measure, venting their own reactors to create a shield of plasma. The tactic had saved them in lesser wars, confusing enemy sensors. But the Terran lances didn't rely on sensors, they relied on math. Impact 19 punched through the plasma veil as if it were mist. The Vanguard broke, not in formation, in spirit. Captains sent distress bursts, officers abandoned firing solutions, Analysts shut down failing models to spare themselves the humiliation of watching numbers unravel. Then, without warning, the lances ceased. Exactly mid-cycle. Exactly by choice. Ward finally spoke, voice level, unshaken. "We strike only to stop your advance, not to conquer." Restraint, after such precision, was its own kind of storm. The battlefield fell quiet. And the Council realized the humans had chosen not annihilation, but message. The battlefield fell into an uneasy stillness, broken only by the drifting wreckage of the shattered vanguard. No Terran ship advanced, no interceptor pressed advantage. The humans held position behind the still glowing grid as if waiting for the Council to remember something they had chosen to forget. Envoy Ward raised a small hollow emitter, the same one that had displayed the activation of the 67 response ships. This time, the projection expanded into 3 slow-rotating star maps. Familiar to some, avoided by many, denied by all. Designation: Orin Kep, Telvaron Reach, Kasari Fold. The 3 disputed frontier systems. The chamber murmured, then fractured into outright denial. Those worlds were listed in Council archives as uninhabited, strategically irrelevant, environmentally hostile. Claims crafted centuries earlier to justify their quiet removal from public record. The Council had assumed no one would revisit the lie. Ward's voice cut through the noise with the same surgical calm. "You concealed the existence of Terran colonies in these systems. You concealed the disappearance of their signals. And you concealed your intent to harvest their hyperlane cores." Shock rippled through the tiers, not because the accusation was unbelievable, but because every species recognized the truth inside it. The hyperlane cores were rare. Terran engineering made them stable. Whoever controlled them controlled expansion for the next century. A stinger dropped like a hammer. You fired to silence exposure. The Council chair attempted a measured reply, but the chamber betrayed him. Frills tightening, tendrils curling, pulses rising. Guilt, normally hidden behind diplomatic veneer, now leaked through a dozen species. Ward shifted the projection. The map zoomed into the Orin Kep system, displaying a time-stamped image. A Terran outpost charred into silence, orbital rings sheared, civilian habitats cold. The next rotation showed Talvaron, a mining world evacuated mid-signal. Its last transmission cut at 0.9 seconds. The third image revealed Kasari Fold, a colony ship adrift, its engines offline, its emergency beacons severed. 3 systems, Ward said quietly, all erased from your census, all active Terran settlements. Delegates scrambled for alibis. They blamed pirates, they blamed anomalies, they blamed Terran mismanagement. Anything but the truth. But humanity had not arrived with only accusations. They had arrived with evidence. The hollow shifted again, this time to sensor logs recorded by the 18 covert Terran listening buoys that the Council had never detected. Each buoy showed the same signature: Council patrol vessels entering restricted lanes hours before each system fell silent. One delegate lashed out, calling it fabricated. Another accused humans of provocation. But the data spoke without emotion. Timestamps, energy traces, spatial drift, numbers without anger, proof without theatrics. Ward gave them no triumph, just clarity. You feared our independence. You feared our expansion. And you feared losing control of hyperlane ownership. One dreadnought captain, patched into the chamber, whispered what everyone else was thinking. This was not diplomacy. This was acquisition. And in that moment, morality inverted. The Council's aggression was no longer defensive. It was predatory. The Terran refusal, once painted as rebellion, became survival. The skirmish outside was no longer a breach of protocol. It was a demand for accountability. Ward lowered the emitter. The maps faded into darkness. Your ambition cost 3 systems, he said. We will not let it cost more. The chamber, stripped of its certainty, had nothing left to hide behind. The moral frame had shifted.
And now the Council had to face its own motives in the light humanity had forced upon it. The chamber struggled for breath after the revelation of the 3 lost systems. Delegates whispered, deflected, recalculated. But Ward did not press further. He simply stepped back, allowing silence to settle like a judgment the Council had earned on its own. When he spoke again, it was not accusation, it was explanation. "You believed our quiet meant weakness," he said. "It meant preparation." The central hollow shifted to a lattice of faint blue points, so faint that the Council's most sensitive arrays had missed them for years. 18 dots pulsed in slow sequence, each tied to a different sector along the frontier. Their spacing was deliberate, optimized, mathematical. 18 listening buoys, built from composite alloys that the Council had never cataloged, operating on passive quantum drift reflection rather than active scans. Recording everything, firing nothing. For nearly 30 decades, they had watched the movements of patrol ships, the trajectory shifts of reconnaissance drones, the subtle deviations in flight corridors that hinted at Council intent. A low murmur spread across the tiers. Several delegates recognized the buoy patterns. Too late. They had flown past ghosts that watched without blinking. Ward zoomed into one buoy's logs. 27 years ago, your fleets entered Orenkep territory under the guise of anti-piracy patrols. We did not respond. 24 years ago, Telvaron Reach saw unauthorized excavation attempts. We did not respond. 22 years ago, Kasari Fold recorded Council drones marking subspace fault lines. We still did not respond. One stinger cut clean through the chamber. We were listening, not hiding. Humanity had silently mapped a decade-spanning pattern of encroachment, not through confrontation, but through observation. The Council had misread that patience for compliance. They had misread discipline as submission. They failed to ask why Terran borders remained so quiet for so long. The hollow expanded again, this time to a diagram of a fleet configuration. 67 ships arranged in 3 concentric shells, each position tuned to rapid revectoring. The response wing, the quiet backbone of Earth's solitary doctrine. For 32 years, Ward said, we trained alone. No alliances, no joint exercises, no shared patrols. We built systems designed to act without support. The Council chair attempted to object, claiming the humans had rejected diplomatic initiatives. Ward countered with calm precision. You offered dependency, not partnership. The chamber flinched at the phrasing. Ward continued. Our doctrine is simple. Assume abandonment. Train for isolation. Prepare for betrayal. Survive regardless.
It was the closest thing to bitterness the humans had shown, and yet even that was tempered by discipline. No raised voice, no dramatics, just a truth the Council had never bothered to see. The projection shifted again, this time to activation traces recorded moments before the meeting began. The 67-ship response wing had not simply powered up, it had done so in a cascade following a precise order, each ignition offset by 0.4 seconds, each crew already at stations, each ship holding fire with absolute restraint. You thought we activated them because you fired, Ward said softly. We activated them because you summoned us. A ripple of realization spread through the chamber. Humanity hadn't come unprepared. They had come expecting the worst, and still chosen diplomacy first. Ward lowered the projector. We were prepared alone, he finished, but we did not come to stand alone. The Council, stripped of illusion, understood the weight of that choice. The arrival of the Hinterfleet was meant to restore dignity to the Council. 4,900 ships emerged from slipstream in a sweeping crescent, heavy cruisers, carrier arcs, missile barges, beacon jammers, all arranged in a display of overwhelming mass. The chamber exhaled in collective relief, mistaking scale for control. If the vanguard had faltered, the Armada would remind humanity of its place. But the Terrans did not reposition, they did not flare engines, they did not broadcast threats. The grid held,
calm and unshaken, as if the difference between 11 dreadnoughts and a 4,900-ship force were irrelevant. The Armada advanced anyway. Their forward lines lit with synchronized charge signatures, an array designed to crush through brute saturation. The first wave fired, a broad-spectrum storm of energy meant to flatten grid defenses through cumulative strain. It raced across the void in a wall of light. The Terran grid absorbed it. No fluctuation, no bleed, no breach. The Armada tried a staggered pattern next, alternating power bands to break absorption algorithms. The grid pulsed once, adjusting, and swallowed that too. A stinger hit the chamber with cold precision. Absorption stable. The Council's analysts panicked, flipping through outdated models that had once explained Terran limits. None applied now. None even approximated reality. Then the humans moved. Not forward, but upward, splitting formation along two silent axes. The 67 response ships fanned outward in arcs so precise they appeared pre-rendered. The interceptors rose behind them, dozens slicing through the void like scalpels preparing an incision. Ward had said they did not escalate. He had not said they could not. The first Terran volley did not target hulls. It targeted command latency. Needles of compressed kinetic packets, thin as filaments, fast as thought, cut through relay nodes on the fleet's outer perimeter. 300 ships lost synchronization within seconds, their formation drift fracturing into chaotic spirals. The second volley severed carrier guidance links. Drones spilled into the void, blind and disarmed, their command ships suddenly useless. The Armada attempted full-spectrum jamming. Terran systems ignored it. Human targeting did not rely on comms. It relied on prediction, on physics, on inevitability. Then came the set piece. Interceptors fired microlances calibrated to neutralize propulsion rather than destroy hulls. One strike per vessel, one vector per strike. In 0.42 to 0.48 second intervals, the lances flicked outward, disabling engines across hundreds of cruisers. Ships drifted, intact but defeated, robbed of agency without suffering annihilation. The Council stared as the pattern unfolded. Terran precision was not brutality, it was decision. Every captured vessel was a message. We can end you, we choose not to. A dreadnought captain broke ranks and ordered a desperate full burn. The Terrans responded with a single kinetic lance, one strike, one impact, removing the dreadnought's primary weapon array while sparing its core. Restraint sharper than destruction. The Armada crumbled, not in flames, but in silence. Thousands of ships immobilized, disarmed, drifting like relics waiting to be catalogued. When the final volley ceased, the voice that filled the chamber was steady, measured, unavoidable. "Your fleet lives," Ward said, "because we chose proportionality." The battlefield lay quiet, and the Council finally understood the scale of mercy they had been shown. The wreckage of the Hinterfleet drifted in solemn spirals, thousands of immobilized hulls glinting faintly against the starfield. No detonations, no burning cores, no kill signature clouds. Humanity had dismantled an armada without turning the void into a graveyard. And that restraint, more than the precision itself, unsettled the Council to its core. Terran medships were the first to move. They slipped past the grid in steady, deliberate vectors, broadcasting open humanitarian codes. Council officers watched in disbelief as the humans approached disabled vessels, not as victors, but as emergency responders. Automated tethers linked to ruptured hulls. Casualty pods were extracted with a delicacy that suggested obligation, not triumph. Envoy Ward projected the casualty count into the chamber. Total confirmed fatalities, 217. A number impossibly low for a 4,900 ship engagement. A stinger passed through the hall like a held breath finally released. This is mercy, not weakness. Council MedCorps requested permission to assist. Ward granted it without condition. Terran medics guided them ship by ship, sharing triage schematics and casualty mapping. The cooperation was jarring. Species who had mocked human obsolescence now took instructions from them in silence. One captain, humbled, asked why the Terrans saved those who had tried to erase them. Ward answered with the same calm weight he'd carried since the summit began. Because justice demands survivors, not ashes. As wounded officers were transferred to stabilized platforms, Ward shifted the chamber display again, this time showing logs from the disputed systems. Orenkep's severed habitats, Talvaron's interrupted distress burst at 0.9 seconds, Kessery Fold's silent colony ship. Every image carried its own indictment. "We request hearings," Ward said. "Transparent trials, no executions, no erasures, only truth." The words rippled through the tiers like a new gravitational pull. Most council powers expected vengeance. They would have delivered it without hesitation had the roles been reversed. Yet the humans, who had every right to end the council's authority in a single order, chose procedure. A senior delegate balked. "You would allow those responsible to live?" Ward did not waver. Yes, justice without cruelty is sovereignty. Justice with cruelty is tyranny. For the first time since the summit began, the chamber grew quiet from something other than fear. A political rearrangement formed almost visibly across the tiers. Species who once viewed the council as an inevitable authority now gauged their future through Terran discipline instead, through the calm weight of a civilization that could dismantle fleets, yet restrained the final blow. Allies reevaluated alliances. Rivals reconsidered hostility. The currents of power shifted, subtly but irreversibly. Human medships transmitted the final stabilization update. 4,327 vessels recovered, 573 still in tow, all crews accounted for. No further losses, no punitive strikes. One Zahari ambassador whispered what others didn't dare say aloud. If they had wanted empire, they would have taken it today. Ward heard, but chose not to respond. The humans did not need to claim power. They were redefining it. With every wounded life saved. With every enemy spared. With every truth demanded without bloodshed. And as the chamber absorbed the new reality, the council understood that the galaxy would not remember the battle as humanity's victory. It was remember the mercy after it. The chamber was still adjusting to the weight of mercy when the lights dimmed, not for drama, but for data. A silent alert pulsed across the Terran envoy's console. Ward glanced at it once, and something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not urgency, but recognition. He raised the holo emitter for the final time. What appeared was not a fleet, not a demand, not evidence of council wrongdoing. It was a single waveform. Thin, uneven, almost lost in background noise. Yet, the moment it stabilized, the chamber felt a subtle tightening, like gravity remembering itself. Designation, unknown anomaly signature. Origin, beyond council borders. Frequency offset, 0.003 variance. Amplitude drift, negative correlation. One signature. Only one. The council chair frowned. A remnant of your listening buoys? Ward shook his head. This did not come from our frontier. He magnified the signal trace, revealing distortions no council register had ever documented. Spatial ripples forming and collapsing in 1.7-second intervals, as if something were testing the fabric of subspace rather than moving through it. A stinger rolled through the silence. Something is reaching. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances. For centuries, the council had relied on predictable threats. Pirates, rival coalitions, rogue AIs. Everything fit into categories. Everything obeyed known constraints. But this signal refused categorization. It was too stable to be natural, too inconsistent to be artificial, and too distant to belong to any known frontier species. Ward zoomed out the projection, displaying the anomaly's location relative to council space. It sat just beyond mapped territory, outside the lanes humanity and council had ever contested. A quiet void, a region no one claimed because nothing lived there. Except now, something did. The Council's analysts whispered rapid interpretations: a rogue machine, a collapsed hyperlane echo, a phantom signature from the 3 lost systems. None of their models aligned. Ward added a second set of data, logged not by the buoys, but by the Terran grid itself moments after the hinterfuge engagement. Faint distortions had brushed the outer edges of the battlefield, unnoticed by Council sensors, but caught by Terran passive arrays. Amplitude match, 97.4%. Temporal drift, identical. Trajectory, inbound. This time, the chamber froze. "Is this an attack?" one delegate asked. Ward did not answer immediately. He allowed the weight of the question to settle. "We don't know. Yet." The Council pressed for speculation. Humans refused to guess. Instead, Ward displayed a final overlay: 3 small points where the anomaly's prior traces aligned with the disappearance timelines of Oren Kep, Talvaron Reach, and Kesseri Fold. Coincidence? Pattern? Cause? The chamber could no longer pretend ignorance. One Zari captain whispered, "We thought you were the danger." Ward replied softly, "We were never your threat." The hollow shifted into a simplified map of Council and Terran space, a faint arc drawing from the anomaly's origin toward their shared frontier. Slowly, deliberately, unavoidable. "We did not come here to conquer," Ward said. "We came because something else is coming, and it will not distinguish between your worlds and ours." The chamber absorbed the implications. Unity, once unthinkable, no longer felt optional. The political lines rearranged themselves in silence, shaped by fear and necessity rather than negotiation. Ward lowered the emitter, ending the projection. "The battle is over," he said, "but the horizon has changed." Outside the viewport, the remnants of the Hinterfleet drifted in quiet testimony: shipwrecks spared, lives saved, a future forced into cooperation by forces far larger than any Council mandate. Humanity had refused surrender. Now, the galaxy would have to refuse extinction. The anomaly pulsed again, faint, distant, inevitable.